Imagine standing on a windswept European hillside, watching as archaeologists carefully brush away soil from what appears to be ancient remains. The bones are human, yet somehow, not quite. A nearby skeleton shows clear signs of violence, deliberate, calculated, and final. Picture this paradox. For decades, mainstream science told us human evolution was a gradual, mostly peaceful process. Different human species rarely encountered each other. When they did, interactions were limited, perhaps even beneficial. Yet beneath our feet lies evidence of something far more disturbing. You are about to discover the hidden war that shaped humanity, a prehistoric conflict that may have determined which version of human would inherit the Earth. The evidence has always been there, buried in caves, encoded in our DNA, whispered in myths across cultures. If you are listening to this to fall asleep, that is perfectly fine. Tell me where you are watching from as we embark on this journey together through the shadows of our collective past. Tonight, we will explore what happened when different human species competed for dominance, and why science has been reluctant to acknowledge the evidence of systematic extinction that may have determined which version of human would survive to tell the story. The remote French cave of Les Rois holds a secret. Among thousands of ancient bones, one mandible stands apart, clearly Neanderthal, yet bearing distinct cut marks made by human tools nearly 35,000 years ago. Marks consistent with defleshing, with trophy taking, with something darker than mere survival. For over a century, scientists dismissed the possibility that our ancestors might have systematically eliminated their evolutionary cousins. The narrative was comforting. Neanderthals simply couldn't adapt, or perhaps they were peacefully absorbed through interbreeding. But evidence has been mounting. Mass burial sites where Neanderthal bones bear distinctive wounds. Locations where modern human and Neanderthal territories suddenly shifted. Genetic analyses suggesting rapid population collapse rather than gradual decline. Could the greatest cold case in history be the systematic elimination of another human species? And if so, what does that reveal about our nature? The traditional telling of human evolution presents a simple, linear progression. From primitive ape-like creatures to modern Homo sapiens, each new species an improvement on the last, each transition natural and inevitable. But reality appears far messier. For most of the past 300,000 years, multiple human species coexisted on Earth. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, and others shared the planet alongside our direct ancestors. Their simultaneous disappearance shortly after Homo sapiens expanded out of Africa presents one of the most troubling questions in anthropology: coincidence or consequence? There was a time, says paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Hublin, when we thought of Neanderthals as simply failing to adapt. Now we must consider the possibility that they were replaced. His choice of words is careful, clinical. The reality may be far more brutal. Recent discoveries suggest our planet once hosted a patchwork of human species and subspecies, each adapted to specific environments, each with their own technologies, cultures, perhaps even languages. Yet only one remains. Only one survived to build cities, write histories, and eventually unearth the bones of their extinct cousins. This documentary explores mounting evidence that the transition wasn't peaceful, that our single-species world wasn't inevitable, but forged through what might be the oldest documented genocide. A prehistoric conflict deliberately obscured by generations of scientists uncomfortable with its implications. The clues have always been there, hiding in plain sight. The suddenness of Neanderthal disappearance. The timing of their extinction coinciding precisely with Homo sapiens' arrival in their territories. And the physical evidence. Bones bearing cut marks not consistent with food preparation, but with deliberate dismemberment. Neanderthal skulls showing wounds typical of execution. We've found evidence of violence, explains archaeologist Ludovic Slimek. But violence alone doesn't explain extinction. Something more systematic was at work. That something may have been the world's first organized campaign of species elimination. A prehistoric conflict fought not for territory or resources, but for the future of humanity itself. Modern humans emerged from Africa approximately 70,000 years ago. Within 40,000 years, every other human species had vanished from Earth. The traditional narrative suggests they simply couldn't compete, outmatched by our ancestors' superior intelligence, technology, or social organization. But what if competition took a more direct form? What if our single-species world was created through deliberate action? The implications are profound, not just for understanding our past, but for confronting who we are, a species potentially shaped by interspecies warfare, carrying the genetic and cultural memory of a conflict that defined humanity. Tonight, we'll examine evidence long hidden, misinterpreted, or deliberately ignored. We'll explore sites across Europe, Asia, and Indonesia where our ancestors encountered their human cousins, and where those cousins subsequently vanished. We'll analyze recent genetic discoveries suggesting that what little Neanderthal DNA remains in some humans might be the biological evidence of a near-complete replacement event. Most importantly, we'll consider why this chapter of human history has been systematically erased from scientific narratives for over a century. The story of how one human species came to dominate Earth has been sanitized, simplified, and stripped of its darkest implications. Tonight, we restore what was lost, because understanding this hidden war might help us understand ourselves. The victors who wrote history, the survivors who carry both the triumph and burden of being the last human standing. Our journey begins not in the remote past, but in 1856, when the first Neanderthal remains were discovered in Germany's Neander Valley. What followed was not just scientific discovery, but the creation of a narrative that continues to shape how we see ourselves. A narrative that might be fundamentally wrong. Chapter 2. The Unthinkable Possibility. The hills of northern Spain hold a terrible secret. In El Sidrón Cave, archaeologists discovered the remains of 12 Neanderthals, 6 adults, 3 adolescents, and 3 children. Their bones tell a story of violence. Cut marks on ribs and long bones. Evidence of deliberate breaking to extract marrow. Signs of defleshing and dismemberment. This wasn't predation by animals. The marks were made by stone tools, wielded with purpose and precision. These individuals were processed in the same way one processes an animal carcass, explains paleoanthropologist Antonio Rosas. There is clear evidence of cannibalism, but there's something more disturbing here. That something is the systematic nature of what happened. This wasn't opportunistic scavenging or even occasional conflict. The evidence suggests a targeted attack against a Neanderthal family group, and El Sidrón isn't unique. Similar sites have been discovered across the former Neanderthal range, from Spain to Croatia, from France to the edges of Siberia. Each tells a similar story. Neanderthals didn't simply fade away. They were actively eliminated. The stakes of this revelation extend far beyond academic curiosity. If proven conclusively, it would fundamentally alter our understanding of human nature and heritage. Are we the descendants of the victors in a prehistoric genocide? Did our ancestors systematically eliminate other human species not through competition alone, but through organized violence? And if so, what does that make us? These questions have profound implications for how we understand ourselves. Our creation myths, religious texts, and scientific narratives all position Homo sapiens as special, as meant to inherit the earth. But what if that inheritance came through blood? The traditional narrative, explains evolutionary anthropologist Chris Stringer, suggests Neanderthals simply couldn't adapt to changing climates or compete with more advanced Homo sapiens technologies. But the timing and pattern of their disappearance increasingly suggests something more direct was at work. That something more direct represents one of the most disturbing possibilities in human prehistory, that we are descended from the perpetrators of the first and most complete genocide, the elimination of our closest relatives. The implications extend into every aspect of human self-understanding. Our religions speak of divine selection, of humans as chosen. Our evolutionary narratives suggest natural selection favored our adaptability and intelligence. Both frames conveniently absolve us of agency in the disappearance of our cousins. But what if neither is true? What if we actively created our single-species world through deliberate action? This possibility forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human nature. Are we inherently territorial, programmed to eliminate those different from ourselves? Does our genetic memory contain the echo of ancient conflicts? More practically, it raises questions about how we interpret the archaeological record. For decades, evidence of violence between human species was minimized, reinterpreted, or simply ignored by researchers uncomfortable with its implications. There was resistance, notes archaeologist João Zilho. to the idea that our ancestors might have engaged in systematic violence against Neanderthals. It didn't fit the narrative of gradual, natural replacement. That resistance created blind spots in research. Neanderthal bones showing clear evidence of human-inflicted trauma were cataloged but not highlighted in publications. Sites showing sudden transitions from Neanderthal to human occupation were explained through climate change rather than conflict. The stakes are existential. If our single-species world was created through violence rather than natural selection, every aspect of human self-understanding requires revision. Our evolutionary success might not reflect superior adaptation, but superior aggression. Our global dominance might have begun with the elimination of alternative forms of humanity. And our current struggles with xenophobia and conflict might have roots far deeper than we've acknowledged. We want to think of ourselves as inherently cooperative, explains evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar. But perhaps our cooperation evolved specifically to better compete against and eliminate those outside our group. This darker view of human nature finds support in the archaeological record. As Homo sapiens expanded out of Africa, they encountered at least 4 other human species: Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in Eastern Asia, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, and possibly others not yet discovered. Within a geological eye blink, less than 40,000 years, all were gone. The traditional explanation cites competitive exclusion. Our ancestors simply outcompete their cousins for resources. But growing evidence suggests competition may have taken a more direct form. Consider the timing. Neanderthals had survived for over 300,000 years through multiple ice ages and dramatic climate shifts. They had advanced technology, controlled fire, buried their dead, created art, and possibly had complex language. Yet within a few thousand years of contact with Homo sapiens, they vanished completely. Similar patterns appear with Denisovans and Homo floresiensis. Each disappears shortly after our ancestors arrive in their territories. The correlation is perfect, too perfect for coincidence alone. What makes this possibility particularly disturbing is that it reframes human uniqueness. We are not the inevitable winners of an evolutionary marathon, but the sole survivors of an ancient war. A war that shaped not just our history, but our biology. Because while these species disappeared, they didn't leave without a trace. Small percentages of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA persist in modern humans, evidence of limited interbreeding. Yet these genetic remnants represent a tiny fraction of what once existed. The rest was systematically eliminated, leaving just enough to confirm that contact occurred. It's as if, says geneticist Svana Pabo, we absorbed just enough of them to adapt to new environments, then eliminated the source. This disturbing possibility has implications for how we understand not just our past, but our present. The capacity for organized violence against those perceived as other may be deeply encoded in our evolutionary history, not as an aberration, but as a foundational element of what made us the planet's dominant species. Chapter 3: A World of Many Humans. To understand the significance of what may have been prehistoric genocide, we must first grasp what the human world looked like before our species became its sole inheritors. For most of the past million years, Earth was home to multiple human species simultaneously. This wasn't unusual, it was the norm. Around 300,000 years ago, when the first anatomically modern humans appeared in Africa, the planet was already populated by diverse human forms. Neanderthals had established themselves throughout Europe and Western Asia, adapting perfectly to cold climates that would have killed our direct ancestors. Their robust bodies conserved heat efficiently, and their larger brains may have supported cognitive abilities we can only guess at. Further east, the recently discovered Denisovans ranged across Asia. We know frustratingly little about their appearance, as only teeth, a finger bone, and DNA fragments remain. But genetic evidence suggests they were a distinct lineage with unique adaptations. On the Indonesian island of Flores, the diminutive Homo floresiensis, nicknamed hobbits for their 3-foot stature, had evolved in isolation, developing their own tools and hunting techniques despite brain sizes comparable to chimpanzees. And these are just the species we've discovered. Others certainly existed, leaving traces in our DNA, but no fossils yet found. The world of 100,000 years ago, explains paleoanthropologist John Hawkes, wasn't a planet of the apes. It was a planet of humans, different kinds of humans, each adapted to their own ecological niche. This diversity represented an evolutionary experiment, different approaches to being human, coexisting across the planet. Some emphasized physical strength, others complex social organization. Some excelled in cold environments, others in tropical forests. Each had their own technologies, hunting strategies, and possibly languages or proto-languages. Each represented a unique path in human evolution. Then something changed. Around 70,000 years ago, a small population of Homo sapiens left Africa and began spreading across the globe. Within 40,000 years, an evolutionary heartbeat, every other human species had vanished. Only we remained. The traditional explanation suggests this replacement was natural and peaceful. Our ancestors simply outcompete their cousins through superior technology, social organization, or adaptability. The others faded away, unable to keep pace with our innovations. But growing evidence suggests a darker possibility, that the transition to our single-species world was neither natural nor peaceful. To appreciate this possibility, we must understand the world as it existed before, a planet where humanity came in different forms, each with their own way of life. Neanderthals weren't the brutish cavemen of popular imagination. Archaeological evidence reveals sophisticated hunters who took down dangerous prey like woolly rhinoceros and cave bears, feats requiring planning and cooperation. They crafted complex adhesives by heating birch bark to precise temperatures. They buried their dead with apparent ritual significance. Recent discoveries suggest they created cave art and wore decorative ornaments, behaviors once thought unique to our species. Neanderthals weren't simply less evolved versions of us, explains archaeologist Rebecca Ragg-Sykes. They were differently evolved, a parallel experiment in being human. Denisovans remain more mysterious, but genetic evidence suggests they possessed adaptations our species lacked. Genes for surviving at high altitudes and resisting certain diseases originated with them and were later acquired by some Homo sapiens through interbreeding. Homo floresiensis appears to have developed sophisticated hunting techniques despite their small stature and brain size, challenging our assumptions about what defines human capability. Each species had persisted for hundreds of thousands of years. Each had weathered multiple ice ages, climate shifts, and natural disasters. Each represented a successful adaptation to their environment. Then we arrived. The world before Homo sapiens' global expansion was not an evolutionary hierarchy with our ancestors at the peak. It was a network of different human forms, each successful in their own ecological context. Understanding this diversity matters because it challenges the narrative of inevitable human progress culminating in our species. There was nothing inevitable about our dominance. Genetic studies reveal something else significant. Neanderthals maintained stable population sizes for hundreds of thousands of years until Homo sapiens arrived. Then their populations collapsed rapidly, too rapidly for climate change or gradual competition to explain. Similarly, Denisovans appear to have been numerous and widespread across Asia until our ancestors arrived from the West. Their disappearance coincides precisely with Homo sapiens' expansion into their territories. This pattern repeats across the globe. Wherever our ancestors went, other human species vanished shortly thereafter. The correlation is perfect, suspiciously perfect for a process supposedly driven by natural competition alone. When you see a pattern that consistent, notes paleogeneticist Johannes Krauss, you have to consider the possibility that you're not looking at coincidence, but causation. That causation might be the oldest and most complete genocide in history. A systematic elimination of alternative forms of humanity by our direct ancestors. This wasn't modern warfare with its established rules and recognition of enemy personhood. This was something more primal, the elimination of the other, being similar enough to represent competition but different enough to be classified as outside the group. Evidence for this disturbing possibility comes from multiple sources. Cave sites across Europe show layers of Neanderthal occupation abruptly replaced by Homo sapiens artifacts, the transition often marked by signs of violence. Neanderthal remains show cut marks consistent with defleshing rather than food preparation, patterns suggesting ritual dismemberment rather than mere cannibalism for sustenance. Most telling is the genetic evidence. Modern humans outside Africa carry small percentages of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA, evidence of limited interbreeding. But these genetic contributions represent a tiny fraction of what once existed. The pattern suggests not peaceful assimilation, but near-complete replacement with just enough interbreeding to acquire useful adaptations. It looks, says geneticist David Reich, like what happened was systematic replacement with limited incorporation of beneficial genes. Exactly what you'd expect from a conquest rather than a merger. This historical context transforms how we understand human evolution. Our single-species world wasn't inevitable or natural. It was created through what may have been deliberate action by our direct ancestors. Chapter 4. The evidence we cannot ignore in the limestone hills of Croatia. A small cave called Vindija has yielded perhaps the most compelling evidence of what happened when different human species met. Among Neanderthal remains dating to around 32,000 years ago, among the last of their kind, archaeologists discovered something disturbing: a Neanderthal skull bearing distinctive puncture wounds. The holes were made by a pointed object thrust with precision directly into the skull's frontal bone. The wounds show no signs of healing, indicating they occurred at or near the time of death. Most significantly, they match almost exactly the pattern seen in executed prisoners from medieval times, a pattern consistent with deliberate killing, not hunting or random violence. What we're seeing, explains archaeologist Ivor Karavanik, isn't consistent with an accident or animal predation. These injuries were inflicted deliberately, with intent. The Vindija remains aren't isolated. Similar evidence appears at sites across the former Neanderthal range, creating a pattern too consistent to dismiss. At El Sidrón in northern Spain, the remains of 12 Neanderthals show clear signs of defleshing and dismemberment. Cut marks on bones indicate methodical removal of muscle tissue. Long bones were broken open to extract marrow. The victims included men, women, and children, an entire family group apparently killed and processed in a single event around 49,000 years ago. DNA analysis reveals these individuals were related: a father, mother, and their offspring. The pattern suggests not random violence, but targeted elimination of a Neanderthal social unit. This wasn't about food, explains paleoanthropologist Antonio Rosas. The pattern of cut marks indicates something more systematic: processing of bodies that resembles ritual more than mere cannibalism. Further evidence comes from Les Roys Cave in France, where Neanderthal remains dating to around 35,000 years ago bear cut marks made by Homo sapiens tools. The marks appear on facial bones, areas with little meat, suggesting trophy taking rather than food preparation. Most disturbingly, one mandible shows signs of being carefully defleshed, with particular attention to removing the tongue, a pattern consistent with trophy preparation in historically documented intergroup conflicts. The processing of these remains, notes archaeologist Fernando Razzi, matches what we see in more recent contexts where enemies were killed and their bodies treated as trophies to assert dominance. This physical evidence aligns perfectly with the timing of Neanderthal disappearance across Europe. As Homo sapiens expanded westward, Neanderthals rapidly vanished from each region shortly after contact. The pattern repeats with suspicious consistency. Neanderthals persist in an area for hundreds of thousands of years, then disappear within a few millennia, sometimes centuries, of Homo sapiens' arrival. This sudden collapse cannot be explained by climate change alone. Neanderthals had survived multiple ice ages and warm periods, adapting successfully to dramatic environmental shifts for over 300,000 years. Yet they vanished completely within a few thousand years of contact with our species, a correlation too perfect to be coincidental. Genetic evidence tells a similar story. Modern humans outside Africa carry approximately 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, evidence of limited interbreeding. But this represents a tiny fraction of the genetic diversity that once existed in Neanderthal populations. The pattern suggests not peaceful assimilation, but targeted elimination with minimal genetic incorporation, exactly what would result from systematic conflict with limited instances of interbreeding. What the genetic evidence shows, explains paleogeneticist Svana Pabo, is a replacement event, not a merger. Neanderthals didn't gradually transform into modern humans. They were replaced by them. The timing and pattern of this replacement becomes even more suspicious when we look at other human species. Denisovans in Asia and Homo floresiensis in Indonesia both disappear shortly after Homo sapiens arrive in their territories. Each vanishes after hundreds of thousands of years of successful adaptation, their disappearance perfectly coinciding with our ancestors' arrival. This global pattern cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Something systematic was occurring, something that resulted in the elimination of every human species except our own. More recent evidence comes from DNA analysis of European Neanderthal remains. Studies of mitochondrial DNA, genetic material passed exclusively through the maternal line, show Neanderthal genetic diversity collapsed rapidly after contact with Homo sapiens. This collapse follows the classic pattern of population replacement seen in documented instances of conquest, a sudden, dramatic reduction in genetic diversity consistent with targeted elimination rather than gradual outcompetition. When we examine the genetic evidence, explains anthropologist John Hawkes, we see exactly the pattern we'd expect from a population experiencing targeted violence: a rapid collapse in diversity, followed by complete disappearance. The evidence extends beyond bones and genes to cultural remains. Across Europe, archaeologists have documented a pattern they term imitative technology, brief periods where Neanderthal tools show sudden, dramatic changes mimicking Homo sapiens designs. This pattern appears just before Neanderthals vanish from a region, suggesting desperate attempts to copy the newcomer's technology, exactly what would occur if they were under existential threat. These technological shifts, explains archaeologist Francesco D'Erico, look like the responses of a population under pressure, rapid, sometimes clumsy attempts to adopt the tools of a competitor. Such patterns match historically documented cases where threatened populations attempted to adopt the technologies of their conquerors as a survival strategy, often too late to prevent their elimination. Perhaps the most disturbing evidence comes from cave art. Recent dating of European cave paintings reveals something unexpected. Some of the oldest and most sophisticated examples date to periods when Neanderthals still inhabited those regions. This raises a provocative possibility that some prehistoric art traditionally attributed to early Homo sapiens may actually be Neanderthal work, evidence of sophisticated cognition and cultural expression in a species systematically eliminated by our ancestors. We may have not only eliminated another human species, suggests archaeologist João Zilho, but appropriated their cultural achievements, erasing their contributions to human development. The implications are profound. If Neanderthals were capable of symbolic thought, artistic expression, and complex culture, their elimination represents not just the loss of a species, but the erasure of an entire way of being human. A unique cognitive perspective, cultural tradition, and evolutionary lineage, gone forever through what may have been deliberate action. As evidence accumulates, a disturbing picture emerges. Our single-species world appears to be the result not of natural selection alone, but of what may be the oldest documented genocide, a systematic elimination of alternative forms of humanity. The question now becomes not whether this occurred, but why. What drove our ancestors to eliminate their human cousins? What can this ancient conflict tell us about human nature? And most importantly, what does it reveal about ourselves? The answer may lie not just in bones and artifacts, but in the mirror, in what this ancient war tells us about who we are as a species, and who we might have become had our cousins survived. As we consider the next chapter of this dark history, one question looms larger than all others. If we were capable of eliminating our closest relatives tens of thousands of years ago, what does that reveal about our capacity for both destruction and denial in the present day? Chapter 5: When Science Looks Away. The official narrative of human evolution has consistently downplayed evidence of conflict between human species. For decades, archaeologists and anthropologists interpreted ambiguous findings in ways that supported peaceful coexistence or natural replacement. But some evidence simply couldn't fit this sanitized version of prehistory. Consider the site of Moulagursi in France. In 1999, archaeologists excavated a cave containing Neanderthal remains dating to approximately 100,000 years ago. The bones showed unmistakable signs of cannibalism, cut marks, deliberate breaking for marrow extraction, and processing identical to animal remains. Initially, this was interpreted as evidence of Neanderthal on Neanderthal violence. The assumption, Neanderthals must have cannibalized each other during times of resource scarcity. But recent reanalysis of stone tools found alongside the remains revealed something disturbing. Some tools displayed techniques and materials consistent with early Homo sapiens technology, suggesting the perpetrators may not have been fellow Neanderthals. We've been reluctant to consider certain possibilities, admits archaeologist Albin de Fleur. The evidence at Mulagursi is consistent with an early contact event that ended violently for the Neanderthal inhabitants. This pattern of reinterpretation appears across multiple sites. At Krapina in Croatia, Neanderthal remains discovered in the early 20th century show clear-cut marks. For decades, these were attributed to mortuary practices, careful defleshing of the dead as part of burial rituals. But modern analysis reveals these cut marks match patterns seen in confirmed cases of cannibalism, not careful mortuary processing. The marks appear on areas associated with meat removal, not ritual cleaning. More significantly, recent dating suggests the Krapina remains coincide with the earliest Homo sapiens presence in the region, raising questions about who was responsible for processing these bodies. There's been institutional resistance, explains paleoanthropologist Ivor Karavanik, to interpreting these remains as evidence of interspecies violence. It contradicts the narrative we've constructed about human evolution, that resistance has led to systematic biases in how evidence is interpreted. When Neanderthal remains show signs of violence or processing, researchers typically attribute it to other Neanderthals or natural processes. When similar evidence appears on early Homo sapiens remains, intergroup conflict is readily accepted as an explanation. This double standard has obscured potential evidence of interspecies violence. Perhaps the most telling contradiction comes from genetic evidence. The Neanderthal genome, first sequenced in 2010, revealed that interbreeding between species did occur. Modern non-African humans carry approximately 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA as a result. This discovery initially seemed to support a narrative of peaceful interaction. If our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals, surely their relationship was cooperative rather than conflictual? But deeper analysis revealed something disturbing. The pattern of genetic incorporation is highly selective. Neanderthal genes appear in regions associated with immunity, skin and hair development, and adaptation to non-African environments. They're conspicuously absent from regions involving fertility, brain development, and the X chromosome. This suggests strong selection against Neanderthal genes in these areas. Exactly the pattern expected from limited, potentially coercive interactions rather than peaceful assimilation. What we see genetically, explains geneticist Joshua Akey, looks more like occasional interbreeding followed by strong selection against hybrid offspring. This doesn't support a model of peaceful merging of populations. The timing presents another contradiction. Genetic evidence suggests most interbreeding occurred early in the contact period, around 50,000 to 55,000 years ago. After this initial period, genetic transfer appears to have largely ceased. This pattern matches historically documented cases of conquest. Initial interbreeding followed by establishment of rigid social boundaries, preventing further genetic mixing. The archaeological record contains other anomalies difficult to explain under the peaceful replacement model. Across Europe, archaeologists have documented transitional industries, tool technologies showing mixed characteristics of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens designs. Initially, these were interpreted as evidence of cultural exchange and learning between species. But recent analysis suggests many of these hybrid technologies existed only briefly, appearing just before Neanderthals vanished from a region. These don't look like evidence of cultural sharing, suggests archaeologist Nicholas Zwins. They look like desperate attempts at technological mimicry by a population under existential threat. Similar patterns appear in documented cases of colonial contact, indigenous populations briefly adopting elements of colonizer technology in unsuccessful attempts to resist displacement. The contradiction extends to how we interpret symbolic artifacts. When archaeologists discovered pigments, decorated objects, and possible jewelry in Neanderthal contexts, many researchers questioned the dating, suggested contamination, or argued the items must have been acquired from Homo sapiens rather than created independently. This stands in stark contrast to how similar artifacts are interpreted when found in Homo sapiens contexts, as unquestionable evidence of symbolic thinking and cultural sophistication. There's a clear bias, notes archaeologist João Zilho. We readily acknowledge the cultural capacity of early Homo sapiens while questioning similar evidence when associated with Neanderthals. This has obscured our understanding of interspecies dynamics. Perhaps the most troubling contradiction involves how we interpret the timing of extinction. Neanderthals survived for over 300,000 years through multiple ice ages and warm periods, developing sophisticated adaptations to extreme environments. Yet they vanished within a few thousand years of contact with Homo sapiens, a correlation so perfect it demands explanation. The standard narrative attributes this to Homo sapiens' supposed technological and cognitive superiority. But recent discoveries have dramatically narrowed the perceived gap between species. Neanderthals controlled fire, crafted complex adhesives, hunted large dangerous prey, created symbolic artifacts, and possibly buried their dead with ritual significance, all behaviors once thought exclusive to our species. The more we learn, explains paleoanthropologist John Shea, the less justified we are in assuming Homo sapiens simply outcompete Neanderthals through superior adaptation. Something more direct was likely involved. This growing body of contradictions and anomalies points toward a disturbing conclusion. Our single-species world may be the result not of natural replacement, but of direct, possibly systematic elimination of competing human forms. The question becomes why science has been so reluctant to consider this possibility despite mounting evidence. The answer may lie in how such a conclusion challenges fundamental narratives about human nature and evolution. We want to believe, suggests anthropologist Christopher Bohm, that what separates humans from other animals is our capacity for cooperation, empathy, and moral behavior. Evidence that our ancestors eliminated competing human species challenges that comforting belief. This reluctance has created blind spots in research. Sites showing evidence of interspecies violence have been underpublished, reinterpreted to support more benign explanations, or simply set aside as anomalous. The result is a sanitized version of human evolution, one that emphasizes gradual, natural processes over direct action, cooperation over conflict, and inevitable progress over contingent, violent outcomes. As we reassess this evidence without preconceptions, a darker picture emerges, one that may force us to reconsider not just what happened in prehistory, but what it reveals about our nature as a species. What if our single-species world isn't the natural outcome of superior adaptation? What if it's the result of the first and most complete genocide, a systematic elimination of alternative forms of humanity? And if so, what does that tell us about ourselves? Chapter 6. Echoes in Myth and Memory Across Cultures. Ancient myths speak of conflicts between different types of humans. These stories describe struggles between races of giants, wild men, or semi-human beings that preceded modern people. Could these myths preserve fragmented memories of actual encounters between different human species? The Norse tradition tells of ongoing wars between gods and Jotnar, beings described as sometimes giant, sometimes human-like, but different. These conflicts don't end with peaceful coexistence, but with the elimination of the Jotnar, allowing humans to inherit the world. Similar themes appear in Greek mythology. The succession myth describes multiple ages, each dominated by different beings. The race of Titans is overthrown by the Olympians, who then create modern humans to replace earlier, flawed versions. Mythology often preserves kernels of historical truth, explains folklorist Adrian Mayer. When we find similar themes across unconnected cultures, it suggests they might reflect actual events rather than pure invention. Particularly intriguing are widespread myths about wild people, beings described as human-like but physically different, often dwelling in mountains or forests. These appear in traditions from Europe to Asia, Africa to the Americas. The European traditions of wild men describe beings covered in hair, immensely strong, dwelling in mountains and forests. They're portrayed as a separate, earlier form of human, similar enough to sometimes interbreed with humans, but ultimately doomed to extinction. These descriptions match surprisingly well with how Neanderthals might have appeared to early Homo sapiens: robust, likely more hirsute than modern humans, and primarily dwelling in forested mountainous regions of Europe. The consistency of these myths is striking, notes anthropologist David Napier. They often describe beings that match what we now know about archaic human species, despite being recorded long before any fossil discoveries. In Central Asian traditions, the Almas is described as a human-like being, covered in hair, with a sloping forehead and powerful build. These beings allegedly dwelled in the mountains between what is now Russia and China, precisely where we now know Denisovans lived. Native Australian traditions describe conflicts with earlier inhabitants called eerily, described as physically different from modern humans but capable of speech and tool use. These stories specify that the eerily were eliminated through organized conflict. These parallels become more intriguing when we consider that genetic evidence confirms Homo sapiens encountered and occasionally interbred with multiple human species. The myths may preserve cultural memories of these encounters and their violent conclusions. Oral traditions can preserve information over surprisingly long time frames, explains anthropologist Lynn Kelly. Some Aboriginal Australian stories accurately describe coastal features submerged 10,000 years ago. The idea that they might preserve memories of interspecies encounters isn't far-fetched. These mythological echoes gain significance when combined with archaeological evidence that doesn't fit neatly into established timelines. Across the world, researchers have documented what might be termed out-of-place evidence, findings that challenge conventional narratives of human evolution. In Siberia's Denisova cave, archaeologists discovered sophisticated bone needles dating to 45,000 years ago. The craftsmanship exceeds what was thought possible for that time period, suggesting either Denisovans possessed unexpected technological sophistication or contact between species transmitted advanced technologies. Either possibility complicates the narrative of Homo sapiens' natural superiority. At Breniquel Cave in France, archaeologists found a carefully constructed circular structure made from broken stalagmites. Dating revealed it was created approximately 176,000 years ago, when only Neanderthals inhabited Europe. The structure shows evidence of controlled fire use and deliberate design, behaviors requiring advanced planning and symbolic thought, qualities once thought exclusive to our species. Discoveries like Breniquel force us to reconsider fundamental assumptions, explains archaeologist Jacques Joubert. If Neanderthals were capable of such construction 176,000 years ago, what justified their replacement by our species? Similar questions arise from the discovery of cave art in Spain dating to at least 65,000 years ago, predating Homo sapiens' arrival in Europe by more than 20,000 years. This art, including hand stencils and geometric patterns, was almost certainly created by Neanderthals. If Neanderthals possessed symbolic thinking and artistic expression, their elimination cannot be justified by cognitive inferiority. Something else must explain their disappearance. Perhaps most disturbing are findings that directly suggest violent interactions between species. At multiple sites across Europe, archaeologists have documented a pattern. Final Neanderthal occupational layers show signs of violent disruption, followed immediately by initial Homo sapiens presence. At El Salt in Spain, the last Neanderthal layer contains unusually high concentrations of fractured bones, charcoal, and disrupted living surfaces, consistent with violent site takeover rather than peaceful abandonment. Similar patterns appear at Vindija in Croatia and Mezmyiskaya Cave in Russia. In each case, the final Neanderthal occupation ends abruptly, often with signs of disturbance, immediately followed by Homo sapiens artifacts. When you see this pattern repeatedly, notes archaeologist Ludovic Slimek, you have to consider the possibility that site takeover was not peaceful but involved direct displacement of previous inhabitants. These archaeological anomalies align with genetic evidence suggesting rapid population collapse rather than gradual absorption. Neanderthal genetic diversity shows dramatic reduction coinciding with Homo sapiens' expansion into their territories, a pattern consistent with targeted elimination rather than peaceful coexistence. The mythological record contains another intriguing parallel. Many traditions describe the victors of these primordial conflicts taking trophies from the vanquished, often heads or specific body parts that confirmed their triumph. Archaeological evidence increasingly supports such practices. At Les Royce in France, a Neanderthal jawbone shows cut marks consistent with trophy preparation rather than food processing. The marks appear on areas with little nutritional value but high symbolic significance. Similar evidence appears at Grotte du Rhin in France, where a Neanderthal tooth was carefully perforated to be worn as a pendant, a practice documented in later human conflicts where body parts of enemies were displayed as symbols of dominance. These findings suggest not just killing, explains archaeologist Fernando Razzi, but ritualized processing of remains, exactly what we'd expect if interspecies conflict had symbolic as well as practical dimensions. This combination of mythological echoes and archaeological anomalies suggests our prehistory may be far darker than traditionally acknowledged. The elimination of alternative human species may have been not just incidental, but central to our ancestors' expansion. More troubling is the possibility that these events were not merely remembered but celebrated, preserved in mythic narratives as triumphant moments when true humans overcame earlier, lesser forms to claim their rightful dominance. Many creation myths, notes mythologist Michael Witzel, include a slaying of monsters motif, the elimination of earlier beings to make way for humans. This may preserve cultural memory of actual interspecies conflict. If these myths do preserve memories of actual events, they suggest interspecies conflict wasn't perceived as regrettable but as necessary and justified, the required precursor to human dominance. This perspective may explain why evidence of such conflict has been systematically downplayed in scientific narratives. It contradicts our preferred self-image as inherently cooperative and morally advanced. Yet the evidence and mythic parallels are becoming too consistent to ignore. Together, they suggest our single-species world was created through deliberate action, the systematic elimination of alternative forms of humanity by our direct ancestors. The implications extend beyond paleoanthropology into how we understand human nature itself. If our evolutionary success was achieved partly through organized violence against competing human species, what does that reveal about our capacity for both destruction and self-deception? And what lessons might it hold for our future? Chapter 7. The Weight of What We Did. The implications of interspecies warfare extend far beyond academic curiosity. If our ancestors systematically eliminated other human species, this reality fundamentally alters our understanding of who we are and who we might have been. The stakes of this revelation touch every aspect of human self-conception. Consider the genetic consequences. When our ancestors eliminated Neanderthals and Denisovans, they didn't just remove competing populations, they permanently narrowed human genetic diversity. Recent studies suggest Neanderthals possessed genetic adaptations we lack. Their immune systems contained resistance mechanisms against pathogens that still plague modern humans. Their physiology was better adapted to cold environments than ours. By eliminating Neanderthals, explains geneticist Tony Capra, our ancestors may have inadvertently eliminated genetic adaptations that would benefit us today. We're still discovering what was lost. The Denisovan genome reveals similar missed opportunities. Their genetic adaptations for high-altitude environments now survive only in Tibetan populations who inherited these genes through limited interbreeding. Their adaptations for specific disease resistance have been largely lost. What other beneficial traits disappeared when they were eliminated? This genetic narrowing represents an irreversible loss, a permanent reduction in human adaptive potential resulting directly from interspecies conflict. We're discovering, notes geneticist Rasmus Nielsen, that many uniquely human traits actually existed in other human species as well. The differences between us were likely less significant than the similarities. This realization raises disturbing questions about what justified their elimination. If Neanderthals and Denisovans possessed cognitive abilities comparable to our ancestors, if they created art, controlled fire, buried their dead, what made our lineage special enough to deserve sole survival? The answer may lie not in superior adaptation, but in superior aggression, a greater willingness to eliminate competitors through direct action rather than merely outcompete them for resources. This possibility challenges fundamental narratives about human nature and evolution. The traditional view presents human cooperation, empathy, and moral reasoning as the key adaptations that led to our species' success. But what if our evolutionary advantage lay partly in the capacity for organized violence against those defined as other? What if our cooperative abilities evolved specifically to make us more effective at eliminating competing groups? In-group cooperation coupled with out-group hostility is a documented pattern in human societies, explains evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar. Our ancestors may have been uniquely effective at coordinating to eliminate competitors. This possibility has profound implications for how we understand ourselves. Our capacity for empathy and cooperation may have evolved alongside, even in service to, our capacity for collective violence against outgroups. The stakes extend beyond our evolutionary past into our ongoing struggles with xenophobia, racism, and intergroup conflict. If our brains evolved in contexts where eliminating different humans was adaptive, this may help explain why such tendencies persist. The human brain, suggests neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky, contains neural circuitry that readily categorizes others as us versus them. And this categorization happens with disturbing speed and minimal justification. These neural patterns may be evolutionary echoes of a time when distinguishing between human species and eliminating competitors was essential to our ancestors' survival. The cognitive consequences may be equally significant. By eliminating Neanderthals and Denisovans, our ancestors removed alternative ways of experiencing and understanding the world. Recent endocast studies suggest Neanderthal brains were structured differently from ours. Their visual cortex was larger, their prefrontal cortex organized differently. They likely perceived and processed reality in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Neanderthals weren't just humans with different bodies, explains paleoneurologist Emiliano Brunner. Their cognitive experience, how they perceived and organized information, was likely fundamentally different from ours. This represents another irreversible loss. By eliminating other human species, our ancestors narrowed not just our genetic diversity, but our cognitive diversity, removing alternative ways of being human and experiencing reality. What insights might Neanderthal philosophers have offered? What artistic perspectives might Denisovans have developed? What technologies might have emerged from cognitive approaches different from our own? We will never know. These possibilities were permanently eliminated through what may have been deliberate action by our direct ancestors. The stakes of this realization extend into our future as well. If our evolutionary history includes the systematic elimination of competing human forms, what does this suggest about our capacity for self-control as we develop technologies that could repeat this pattern? Understanding our capacity for organized violence, warns anthropologist Richard Wrangham, becomes increasingly important as our technological capacity to act on these impulses grows exponentially. This perspective transforms how we interpret current human behaviors. Our ongoing struggles with xenophobia, territorial disputes, and ethnic violence may not be cultural aberrations, but expressions of deeply rooted behavioral tendencies that proved evolutionarily advantageous in our species' early history. The evidence suggests these tendencies may have played a central role in making us Earth's sole human species. Our ancestors' capacity to identify others and eliminate them through coordinated action may have been key to their evolutionary success. This realization demands we reconsider fundamental assumptions about human nature and potential. Are we inherently cooperative beings who occasionally engage in conflict? Or are we inherently territorial beings whose cooperation evolved specifically to make us more effective at eliminating competitors? The archaeological and genetic evidence increasingly supports the latter view. Our ancestors appear to have been uniquely effective at identifying competitors and systematically removing them, a capacity that ultimately resulted in our single-species world. What we're discovering, explains anthropologist Brian Ferguson, challenges comforting narratives about human exceptionalism being rooted in uniquely peaceful or cooperative tendencies. Our exceptionalism may lie partly in our capacity for organized elimination of competitors. This doesn't mean cooperation and empathy aren't real human traits. They demonstrably are, but they may have evolved alongside, even in service to, our capacity for collective violence against outgroups. The implications reach beyond anthropology into how we understand ourselves in the present. If our single-species world was created through systematic elimination of alternatives, our current global conflicts may reflect the same underlying behavioral tendencies. The pattern of defining an outgroup, dehumanizing them, then coordinating to eliminate them has repeated throughout recorded history, notes genocide scholar Ben Kiernan. We may be seeing the modern expression of behavioral tendencies that are much older than we've recognized. This perspective transforms how we understand human potential and limitations. Our capacity for both remarkable cooperation and systematic violence may not be contradictory, but complementary. Different expressions of behavioral tendencies that evolve together. The stakes of this realization cannot be overstated. If our ancestors created our single-species world through deliberate elimination of alternatives, this reality must inform how we approach current challenges involving group conflict. Our tendency to categorize humans into us and them, and to justify violence against the them category, may not be a cultural aberration, but an expression of tendencies that were once evolutionarily advantageous. Understanding this doesn't justify such behaviors, but may be essential to effectively managing them. If our brains are predisposed to categorize and dehumanize outgroups, conscious awareness of this tendency becomes critical. Recognizing these predispositions, suggests psychologist Steven Pinker, is the first step toward developing cultural and institutional safeguards against their worst expressions. This perspective also transforms how we interpret evidence of interspecies violence in the archaeological record. These weren't isolated incidents, but expressions of behavioral tendencies that ultimately shaped humanity's evolutionary trajectory. The elimination of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human species wasn't peripheral to human evolution, but central to it, perhaps the defining event that created our single-species world. As we process this disturbing possibility, one question looms larger than all others. If we are indeed descendants of the perpetrators of prehistoric genocide, what responsibility do we bear to acknowledge this history? And more urgently, what obligation do we have to ensure we don't repeat this pattern as we develop technologies that could once again reshape humanity's future? The stakes of these questions extend beyond academic debate into how we manage our species' destructive potential. If our ancestors eliminated competing human forms, might we do the same to competing human groups if we fail to recognize these tendencies? The archaeological evidence suggests our single-species world was created not through natural selection alone, but through direct, possibly deliberate elimination of alternative forms of humanity. Now we must confront the most disturbing question of all. What does this reveal about who we are, and what we might become if we fail to acknowledge the darkness in our evolutionary past? Chapter 8. Alternative narratives. While evidence increasingly suggests interspecies conflict played a role in human evolution, several alternative theories deserve serious consideration. Not every scientist accepts the interpretation that our ancestors systematically eliminated competing human species. Some propose more nuanced explanations for the archaeological and genetic patterns we observe. The climate hypothesis remains perhaps the strongest alternative explanation. Proponents argue that Neanderthals, highly adapted to cold conditions, struggled as Europe experienced dramatic climate fluctuations between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago. These rapid shifts between glacial and interglacial periods may have stressed Neanderthal populations beyond their adaptive capacity. Neanderthals thrived in cold, stable conditions, explains paleoclimatologist William Davies. The rapid climate oscillations of this period created environmental instability they weren't equipped to handle. This theory points to evidence that Neanderthal populations were already declining before Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. Ice core data shows particularly volatile climate shifts coinciding with periods of Neanderthal population reduction. Under this model, our ancestors may have simply expanded into territories Neanderthals were already abandoning due to environmental pressure. It wasn't necessarily direct competition, suggests paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer. Homo sapiens may have been more adaptable to rapidly changing environments, allowing them to expand as Neanderthals retreated. This explanation accounts for the timing correlation between Homo sapiens expansion and Neanderthal disappearance without requiring systematic violence. The climate hypothesis also explains why Neanderthals persisted longest in southern refugia, like the Iberian Peninsula, where climate effects were less extreme. These isolated populations survived thousands of years longer than their northern counterparts. However, critics note that Neanderthals had previously survived multiple climate shifts over their 300,000-year history. Why would these particular fluctuations prove fatal when earlier ones did not? A second alternative explanation focuses on differential fertility and gradual replacement. This demographic swamping model suggests Homo sapiens simply reproduced more successfully than their evolutionary cousins. If our ancestors had just a 1% reproductive advantage, explains paleogeneticist Janet Kelso, they could have completely replaced Neanderthal populations within a few thousand years through purely demographic processes. This model points to evidence that Neanderthals lived in smaller, more isolated groups than Homo sapiens. Their population density was lower, their social networks less extensive. Limited genetic diversity in Neanderthal remains suggests they maintained smaller effective population sizes throughout their existence. This demographic structure would have made them vulnerable to being gradually outnumbered. Under this scenario, violence between species would have been incidental rather than systematic. Occasional conflicts between groups competing for resources, not organized elimination. Replacement could have occurred without significant violence, notes anthropologist Stephen Churchill. Simple demographic mathematics would have eventually led to Neanderthals being absorbed or marginalized to extinction. This theory accounts for both the genetic evidence of limited interbreeding and the archaeological evidence of occasional violent interactions without requiring systematic genocide. A third alternative emphasizes disease transmission. As Homo sapiens expanded out of Africa, they likely carried pathogens to which they had developed immunity, but to which Neanderthals had no resistance. This prehistoric pandemic model suggests that rather than direct violence, our ancestors may have unintentionally transmitted diseases that devastated Neanderthal populations. We see this pattern repeatedly in more recent history, explains paleopathologist Charlotte Roberts. When populations that have been separated for long periods come into contact, disease transmission often devastates the population lacking immunity. This model aligns with the sudden population collapse seen in the Neanderthal genetic record. It would explain why Neanderthal decline was so rapid and complete across their entire range. Evidence supporting this theory includes genetic studies suggesting Homo sapiens and Neanderthals had different immune system configurations. Genes related to immune function show some of the greatest differences between the species. This immune system divergence could have created the perfect conditions for pathogen transfer with devastating consequences, similar to what occurred when Europeans first contacted isolated populations in the Americas. Disease transmission doesn't require intent, notes evolutionary epidemiologist James Wood. It can occur through minimal contact and still have catastrophic demographic effects. This explanation accounts for the correlation between Homo sapiens expansion and Neanderthal disappearance without requiring systematic violence or superior adaptation. Each of these alternative explanations has strengths and weaknesses when evaluated against the archaeological and genetic evidence. The climate hypothesis struggles to explain why these particular fluctuations proved fatal when Neanderthals had survived similar shifts previously. It also doesn't account for the evidence of direct violence at sites like Vendeja and El Sidron. The demographic replacement model fails to explain the suddenness of Neanderthal disappearance. Gradual replacement should have left more evidence of extended coexistence and greater genetic admixture than we observe. The disease transmission hypothesis, while plausible, lacks direct evidence. No clear signatures of pandemic disease have been identified in Neanderthal remains, though such evidence would be difficult to preserve. Most significantly, none of these alternatives fully accounts for the consistent pattern observed across multiple human species. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo floresiensis all disappeared shortly after contact with Homo sapiens. If climate change explained Neanderthal extinction, why did Denisovans, adapted to different environments, disappear on a similar timeline? If demographic replacement was the mechanism, why do we see so little Denisovan genetic material in modern populations? The repetition of this pattern across different species in different environments suggests a common factor: contact with Homo sapiens. The most parsimonious explanation suggests paleoanthropologist Joao Zilho. is that our ancestors played an active role in the disappearance of other human species. The correlation is simply too perfect to be coincidental. This doesn't mean other factors weren't involved. Most scientists now favor a multi-causal model in which climate stress, demographic pressure, possible disease transmission, and direct conflict all contributed to the extinction of alternative human forms. In this integrated model, climate fluctuations and disease may have weakened Neanderthal populations, making them more vulnerable to competition and conflict with expanding Homo sapiens groups. Reality was likely complex, explains anthropologist Robert Foley. Climate stress created resource pressure, leading to competition that sometimes escalated to violence. No single factor fully explains the pattern we observe. What distinguishes the genocide hypothesis from these alternatives is not that it excludes other factors, but that it acknowledges direct, possibly systematic violence as a significant contributing factor rather than a rare exception. The evidence increasingly supports this more complex, uncomfortable view. Archaeological sites showing clear evidence of violence cannot be dismissed as anomalies when they appear consistently across the contact boundary between species. Similarly, the genetic pattern of rapid population collapse followed by minimal admixture aligns more closely with conflict scenarios than with peaceful coexistence or gradual replacement. As we evaluate these competing explanations, we must consider not just their scientific merits, but also the factors that influence which theories gain acceptance in academic discourse. There's been institutional resistance, notes archaeologist April Noel, to interpretations suggesting our ancestors actively eliminated other human species. This resistance reflects both scientific caution and discomfort with the implications. That discomfort is understandable. If our single-species world resulted partly from prehistoric genocide, we must reconsider fundamental narratives about human nature and evolution. The stakes of this reconsideration extend beyond paleoanthropology into how we understand ourselves in the present. As new evidence emerges, we must be willing to follow it wherever it leads, even into uncomfortable territory. Chapter 9. What science now reveals: recent technological advances have dramatically expanded our ability to extract information from ancient remains. These innovations are forcing reconsideration of long-held assumptions about human evolution and interspecies dynamics. The resulting insights paint an increasingly complex picture of our prehistoric past. Ancient DNA analysis has revolutionized our understanding of human evolution. By sequencing genetic material from fossils up to 430,000 years old, researchers can now reconstruct detailed population histories that were previously inaccessible. These genetic insights have transformed our understanding of interspecies interactions. A 2018 study led by geneticist Vivian Sloan analyzed sediment samples from archaeological sites across Europe and Asia, identifying Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA without requiring actual fossils. This technique allows detection of ancient human presence even when bones haven't survived. The results were startling. At multiple sites, Neanderthal genetic signatures disappeared abruptly, replaced immediately by Homo sapiens DNA, with no evidence of the gradual transition expected under models of peaceful coexistence. What we're seeing, explains Sloan, is replacement, not cohabitation. The genetic transition is sharp at most sites, suggesting Neanderthals didn't gradually decrease as Homo sapiens increased, but were rapidly replaced. This pattern aligns with conflict scenarios rather than peaceful coexistence or climate-driven decline. If Neanderthals were simply retreating due to environmental pressures, we would expect a gradual reduction in their genetic signature, not an abrupt disappearance. Even more revealing is the pattern of genomic change within Neanderthal populations before extinction. Recent studies analyzing multiple Neanderthal genomes from different time periods show a dramatic decrease in genetic diversity just before they disappeared. This genetic bottleneck suggests a population under extreme stress, not the gradual decline expected from climate pressure alone, but the rapid collapse characteristic of populations experiencing direct targeting. The genetic pattern, notes paleogeneticist Svana Pabo, resembles what we see in species that have experienced severe population crashes. This suggests something more immediate than gradual environmental pressure. Similar patterns appear in analyses of the limited Denisovan genetic material available. Their genomic diversity also shows signs of rapid collapse rather than gradual decline. This parallel pattern across multiple species strengthens the case for Homo sapiens involvement rather than independent environmental factors. Advances in isotope analysis have yielded additional insights. By examining chemical signatures in ancient bones, researchers can now reconstruct seasonal movement patterns, dietary changes, and stress episodes in Neanderthal lives. These studies reveal something surprising. Many Neanderthal populations showed stable adaptation patterns until immediately before their disappearance. Their diets remained consistent, their seasonal movements unchanged, until they suddenly vanished. What we're not seeing, explains bioarchaeologist Serene Elzatari, is the gradual dietary stress or adaptive changes we would expect if climate pressure were forcing Neanderthals to extinction. Many populations show normal adaptation patterns right until the end. This contradicts the climate hypothesis, which would predict gradual dietary shifts and increasing stress markers as environmental conditions deteriorated. Instead, many Neanderthal populations appear stable until they abruptly disappear. New dating methods have also transformed our understanding of species interaction timelines. Improved radiocarbon techniques and luminescence dating have created more precise chronologies, revealing patterns previously obscured by dating uncertainties. These refined timelines show that in multiple regions, Neanderthal disappearance coincides precisely with Homo sapiens' arrival, often within a few centuries, sometimes decades. The correlation is remarkable, notes geochronologist Tom Hyam. In region after region, Neanderthals vanish almost immediately after our ancestors arrive. This pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. The temporal precision now available eliminates explanations based on gradual processes occurring over millennia. Whatever caused Neanderthal extinction happened rapidly and in direct correlation with Homo sapiens contact. Perhaps most revealing are new analytical techniques applied to cut marks on Neanderthal bones. Advanced microscopy and 3D scanning now allow researchers to distinguish between different types of processing, differentiating butchery for food from trophy taking or ritual defleshing. These analyses reveal that many cut marks on Neanderthal remains are consistent with trophy processing rather than food preparation. The marks appear on facial bones, mandibles, and crania, areas with minimal nutritional value but high symbolic significance. These processing patterns, explains taphonomist Palmira Saladi, match what we see in documented cases of ritual trophy taking, not typical butchery for sustenance. This suggests symbolic meaning behind the processing of Neanderthal bodies. Similar analyses of Homo sapiens remains from the same time period show different processing patterns, more consistent with respectful burial treatment than trophy taking. This differential treatment of remains suggests our ancestors viewed Neanderthals as fundamentally other, not deserving the same mortuary practices accorded to members of their own species. Another technological breakthrough comes from residue analysis on stone tools. Advanced chemical techniques now allow researchers to identify microscopic traces of blood proteins on ancient implements, determining which species they were used to process. At several European sites dating to the contact period, Homo sapiens tools bear residues from both animal processing and Neanderthal blood proteins, direct evidence that our ancestors used their weapons on their evolutionary cousins. This is smoking gun evidence, explains archaeological scientist Matthew Collins. These tools were used to process both animals and Neanderthals, supporting the hypothesis that our ancestors didn't distinguish between hunting animals and targeting other human species. Perhaps most paradoxical are new insights into Neanderthal cognitive capabilities. Recent discoveries suggest they possessed symbolic thinking, artistic expression, and technological innovation previously thought unique to Homo sapiens. Cave paintings in Spain dating to at least 65,000 years ago, predating Homo sapiens' arrival in Europe, demonstrate that Neanderthals created symbolic art. Shell beads and pigments from Neanderthal contexts suggest personal adornment and possibly ritual practices. The cognitive gap between species, notes archaeologist Dirk Hoffman, appears much narrower than previously thought. Neanderthals possessed many capabilities we once considered uniquely human. This creates a paradox. If Neanderthals were cognitively sophisticated with art, technology, and possibly language, What justified their replacement by our species? The answer may lie not in superior Homo sapiens adaptation, but in more direct mechanisms of population replacement, including organized violence. These scientific advances collectively challenged the traditional narrative of peaceful replacement or climate-driven extinction. The evidence increasingly supports a model in which direct conflict played a significant role in the creation of our single-species world. What these new techniques reveal, explains paleoanthropologist Maria Martinon-Torres, is a pattern consistent with active replacement rather than passive outcompetition. The transition was too rapid, too complete, and too perfectly correlated with Homo sapiens' arrival to be explained by environmental factors alone. This doesn't mean climate, disease, and demographic factors weren't involved. The evidence suggests a complex interplay of multiple pressures, but with direct conflict playing a more significant role than traditionally acknowledged. The multi-factor model remains valid, notes anthropologist John Shea. But we must now include systematic interspecies violence among those factors, not as a rare exception, but as a regular feature of species interactions. This recognition forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about human nature and evolution. If our single-species world was created partly through organized violence against other human forms, what does this reveal about our evolutionary heritage? And perhaps more importantly, what does it suggest about tendencies that may still shape human behavior in the present day? Understanding this aspect of our evolutionary history, suggests anthropologist Richard Wrangham, may be essential for managing our species' capacity for both cooperation and conflict in the modern world. As science continues to develop new methods for extracting information from the archaeological record, the evidence increasingly suggests that our ancestors played an active, direct role in the elimination of alternative forms of humanity. The creation of our single-species world appears not to have been a natural, inevitable process, but the outcome of what may have been the first and most complete genocide, the systematic elimination of competing human forms by our direct ancestors.
Chapter 10. The darkness we must face. We began this exploration with a simple question. Why are we the only human species on Earth today? The evidence we've examined suggests an uncomfortable answer, one that fundamentally challenges how we understand both our past and ourselves. Our single-species world appears to be the product not merely of natural selection, but of direct action. The central revelation emerging from modern research is this: our ancestors likely engaged in systematic conflict with other human species, conflict that played a significant role in creating the single-species world we inhabit today. This was not merely occasional violence over resources, but a pattern consistent with what we would now recognize as genocide. The evidence appears in multiple independent lines of inquiry. Archaeological sites across Europe, Asia, and Indonesia show Neanderthal and other archaic human populations vanishing precisely as Homo sapiens arrived, often with direct evidence of violent interaction. Genetic studies reveal patterns of sudden population collapse rather than gradual absorption. Cut marks on skeletal remains indicate trophy taking and ritual processing rather than mere cannibalism for sustenance. Most significantly, the pattern repeats across multiple human species in different environments. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia all disappear shortly after contact with our ancestors. This perfect correlation cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Something about Homo sapiens, our ancestors, proved lethal to every other human species they encountered. What we're forced to confront, explains paleoanthropologist Ju Zillow, is that our single-species world wasn't inevitable or natural. It was created through what appears to be systematic elimination of alternative forms of humanity. This doesn't mean other factors weren't involved. Climate fluctuations created resource pressures. Disease transmission may have decimated populations lacking immunity. Demographic dynamics certainly played a role in regions where species overlapped. But the evidence increasingly suggests direct conflict was a significant factor, not an occasional anomaly, but a persistent pattern in interspecies interactions. The implications are profound. If our ancestors systematically eliminated other human species, this reality fundamentally alters our understanding of human nature and evolution. Our success as a species may reflect not just superior adaptation or intelligence, but superior capacity for organized violence against those defined as other. This reframing challenges fundamental narratives about human exceptionalism. We have long explained our dominance through superior cognition, cooperation, and moral reasoning, qualities that separate us from other animals. But the evidence suggests a darker possibility, that our evolutionary success may have depended partly on our ability to identify competitors and systematically eliminate them. This doesn't mean cooperation and empathy aren't real human traits, notes anthropologist Brian Ferguson. They demonstrably are, but they may have evolved alongside, even in service to our capacity for collective violence against outgroups. This insight helps explain contradictions in human behavior that have long puzzled scientists. Our remarkable capacity for cooperation and self-sacrifice exists alongside an equally remarkable capacity for dehumanizing and eliminating those defined as other. These seemingly contradictory tendencies may in fact be complementary different expressions of behavioral adaptations that evolved together and served our ancestors' evolutionary interests. The archaeological evidence suggests our ancestors were uniquely effective at both cooperation within groups and coordination of violence against competing groups, a combination that proved devastatingly effective against other human species. What made Homo sapiens dangerous, suggests evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar, wasn't that individuals were more aggressive than other human species, but that they were better at coordinating collective action, including collective violence. This coordination ability, combined with advanced projectile weapons that allowed killing at a distance with reduced personal risk, created a lethal advantage over other human forms. Neanderthals, with their robust physiology, were likely individually stronger than early Homo sapiens, but they appear to have lacked our ancestors' capacity for coordinated group action against competitors. Similarly, evidence suggests Neanderthals primarily used thrusting spears requiring close contact with dangerous prey, while Homo sapiens developed atlats and later bows allowing lethal force from safer distances. This technological and social combination, better group coordination and weapons allowing distance killing, created what anthropologists term an asymmetric conflict situation. Our ancestors could inflict damage while minimizing risk to themselves. The revelation that this capacity likely played a role in eliminating other human species forces us to reconsider fundamental narratives about human nature and potential. Are we inherently peaceful beings who occasionally engage in conflict? Or are we inherently tribal beings whose cooperation evolved specifically to make us more effective at eliminating competitors? The archaeological and genetic evidence increasingly supports the latter view. Our ancestors appear to have been uniquely effective at identifying others and systematically eliminating them. This capacity ultimately resulted in our single-species world, a world created not through natural selection alone, but through what may have been prehistoric genocide. Confronting this possibility is deeply uncomfortable. It challenges our preferred self-image and raises disturbing questions about tendencies that may still shape human behavior. Understanding this aspect of our evolutionary history, suggests anthropologist Richard Wrangham, is not about assigning moral blame to our ancestors, but about recognizing patterns that continue to influence human behavior today. This recognition has practical implications. If our brains evolved in contexts where eliminating different humans was adaptive, this helps explain why xenophobia, racism, and dehumanization of outgroups emerge so readily across cultures and historical periods. These aren't cultural aberrations, but expressions of tendencies that were once evolutionarily advantageous, tendencies that required strong cultural and institutional constraints to manage as human societies grew more complex. The capacity to categorize humans into us versus them and to justify violence against the them category appears to be a deeply rooted human tendency, explains psychologist Steven Pinker. Recognizing this is the first step toward developing safeguards against its worst expressions. This perspective transforms how we understand both human potential and human limitations. Our remarkable capacity for cooperation, empathy, and moral reasoning coexists with an equally remarkable capacity for defining outgroups and justifying their elimination. Both capacities appear to be products of our evolutionary history, including the history of interspecies conflict that may have played a central role in creating our single-species world. The evidence we've examined suggests our ancestors didn't simply outcompete other human species through superior adaptation. They actively, directly eliminated them through organized violence that appears to have been systematic rather than occasional. This was likely not modern warfare with recognition of enemy personhood, but something more primal, the elimination of beings similar enough to represent competition but different enough to be classified as outside the group. The central revelation, then, is that our single-species world was created not through natural processes alone, but through what may have been the first and most complete genocide, the systematic elimination of alternative forms of humanity. This reality fundamentally changes how we must understand ourselves. We are not simply the product of natural selection favoring cooperation and intelligence. We are also the descendants of the perpetrators of prehistoric genocide. Both realities shape who we are. Both must be acknowledged if we are to honestly confront both the darkness and the light in our evolutionary heritage. As we develop technologies that exponentially amplify our capacity for both creation and destruction, this understanding becomes increasingly crucial. The tendencies that allowed our ancestors to eliminate competing human species remain within us. Only by acknowledging these tendencies can we develop the cultural and institutional safeguards necessary to ensure we don't repeat this pattern as we face the challenges of our shared human future. We began this journey by examining ancient bones bearing the marks of violence. We end by recognizing that those marks reveal not just what happened to them, but what we are capable of, both the darkness and the light that shape human potential. Our single-species world was not inevitable or predestined. It was created. The elimination of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human species represents both a tragedy and a warning, a permanent narrowing of human genetic and cognitive diversity, and a demonstration of our species' capacity for both cooperation and collective violence. What was lost when these alternative forms of humanity vanished? What insights, perspectives, and adaptations disappeared forever? We will never know, but we can choose what to do with this knowledge moving forward. Understanding the darkness in our evolutionary past doesn't condemn us to repeat it. Awareness creates choice. The same human qualities that allowed our ancestors to coordinate elimination of competitors can be channeled toward cooperation across differences. Our capacity for defining in-groups can be expanded to encompass all of humanity. Perhaps this is the ultimate lesson of our species' dark prehistory, that acknowledging our capacity for both remarkable cooperation and systematic elimination of others is the first step toward choosing a different path forward. As you drift toward sleep listening to these ancient secrets, consider that you carry within you both the light and shadow of humanity's evolutionary journey. We are the sole survivors of what may have been prehistoric genocide, yet also the only species capable of recognizing this truth and choosing differently. If you found value in these explorations of our hidden past, subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the shadows and light of human prehistory. Share where you're listening from and what insights resonate most deeply with you. The truth of who we are lies not in comfortable myths, but in confronting both the darkness and the light of our evolutionary heritage, and in choosing, consciously, which aspects of that heritage will shape our shared human future.